Welcome back to today's episode of Unapologetic Living. I am so grateful to be here today with Mark Kemp, certified hypnotherapist. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah, they're about 600. And I was just looking this morning. I think it's hold on, I can tell you exactly. 665 cities and 47 different countries and territories. So that's really cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I think it's neat to, sometimes I'll look at the stats and I'll see different cities pop up. And I don't know, it's definitely rewarding to say the least to know that my message might be getting out there to someone.
Definitely, definitely. The beautiful thing about the internet and social media, it allows you to spread a message of positivity when used right and just connect us. That's one of the problems with today's society. We don't connect anymore. We have AI for this or AI for that, and there's a lot of social disconnect. But I choose to turn that around and say it's a better chance for us to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that, and I don't know if I shared this with you. I do some Ubering and I drive Lyft and Uber sometimes.
Okay.
It depends on my week and where I can fit it in, or if I can fit it in, or if I need to fit it in. Um, but since COVID,
Mm,
I have fewer and fewer passengers that seem to want to carry on any sort of conversation with me. And we're in the same car and about 2.5 feet away from one another. And I find it sad. I don't know if that's a good word, but I mean, that's just the word. I'm like, we're here. We could actually be talking to one another and learning about each other,
yes,
even if it's
I
just
agree.
for a few moments.
I agree. In addition to being a certified hypnotherapist, I'm also a licensed optician. I sell eyeglasses for a living. And one thing that I do enjoy about both of my professions, it gives me an opportunity to speak to individuals, not at each other. And that's so key. It's unfortunate, but with texting and all the technology, the beautiful English language is being obliterated.
It is. And I, like you, working one-on-one with people, do get to have interactions and conversations one-on-one, which I like. And but again, the 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 culture in the car has changed.
Yes. And the only thing worse than that is when you're sitting at the dinner table and people aren't communicating. You know, there was a time and not too distant past where the dinner table was a place to come together after the day and share your experiences and talk about things that that were good and some that were less than positive, but it was a chance for us to interact. It was a chance for us to be present in each other's lives.
Absolutely. I think that's why family dinner is so important. I told my kids the other day, I mean, I was part joking, part serious. Like we had gone out to eat
Mm-hmm.
a few weeks back. And I mean, first of all was ready to chuck the phones
Yes.
out into the street of that restaurant. I'm like, but I said, I didn't come out here to enjoy dinner with you while you look at your phones and can't seem to get your mind off what text has come through. I don't know that we'll be going out to eat. I'll be treating you to dinner anymore if this is what I'm going to, like and
Yeah.
it's just, and it's difficult because the kids especially are so, and it's not just kids,
Mm-hmm.
it's adults too.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about technology is that it allows you to connect from anywhere. I remember the first time I got a call, I got my first cell call. I was sitting in a McDonald's, in New York, and the person that I had connected with, they were all the way in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I'm like, wow, look at that. That's amazing.
For sure. And the FaceTime, that type of thing where you can
Yeah.
actually see. the individual on the other line, and that's where technology is amazing and a great addition to our lives.
Yes, yes. I'm dating myself, but I remember back in the old Star Trek TV series where they had the communicators and you hear the beep, beep, and then they'd be able to talk. And now it's come to fruition.
Yeah, yeah, it has. I didn't watch much Star Trek, but so I know we met through the internet.
Yes, actually, yes, that's awesome.
So, and then we got to have a conversation last week, which was fascinating. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story. I'm always looking for ways because healing and growth and transformation can take on, I mean, it can take so many different paths, right? And different healing modalities to move forward or become unstuck.
Yes, yes. I'll be glad to share my backstory. Well, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but I have cerebral palsy. I am physically challenged. And in my role as a licensed optician, I spend many hours a day on my feet, 8 to 9, sometimes 10 hours a day on my feet. And being someone with cerebral palsy, that's a bit of a challenge. I've been a licensed optician over 20 years. So, prior to the pandemic, the biggest talk in the medical community was the opioid crisis. Now here I am. I've been a licensed optician for over 20 years, and I'm facing the possibility of not being able to work anymore because my pain levels were so high. My pain would reach sometimes on a 10 scale as high as 8 or 9. And I searched for a holistic way to alleviate that pain. And one day I was speaking with a friend of mine, and he had said to me, "Why don't you try hypnosis?" jokingly. And I said, "Yeah, no, like most people, I dismissed it. Nah, that's just for TV. That's not real, and no one's going to control my mind." I had all the misconceptions. So, then as luck would have it, a few days later, I was on the University of YouTube, what I like to call it. And, it came across my feed, you know, hypnosis for pain management. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I tried that file, and it didn't work, honestly. But what it did was it sparked a curiosity in me. And I began to go down a rabbit hole, and I searched and searched and searched. And eventually I found one that did. And I was able to, bring my pain from like an 8 or 9 all the way down to like a 1 or 2. Now, I should state for the record, you should never, never, never eliminate pain totally from your body because it's your body's alarm system saying that something's not quite right. And I'm also going to state for the record that hypnosis itself does not heal anything, but what it is, it's a powerful assistant in managing things.
And so you found hypnosis and gave it a try.
Yes.
And did you notice, can you sort of, I don't want to say, yeah, explain or like, what was that first experience like going into, I've had it, I want to say, I did a past life regression and she used
Yeah.
hypnosis.
Yeah. Yes.
And I know for me, that first experience really is my only experience. I almost thought like, am I thinking that like, is this in my head? Am I creating this?
Here's the thing. I'm glad you asked that question in that manner. Hypnosis is around us every day, and we don't even realize it. You're affected by in some type of trance state on a regular basis. Have you ever read a book and you could see the scene in your head? Okay.
Absolutely.
Then you were hypnotized by the words of the author. Have you ever smelled something cooking and you instantly became hungry?
Hmm.
Okay. And here's the kicker that really gets most people. Have you ever watched a tearjerker of a movie or something that's very funny and you begin to cry?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. We all know logically that those are paid actors and actresses, but their portrayal or the screenwriter's words were so effective and so powerful in that portrayal, it evoked emotion. Anything that can be experienced through the five senses can be enhanced or dealt with in a hypnotic state. Because basically what we're doing is the human brain thought process, it's made up of two levels, the conscious and the subconscious. Now, your conscious thought, that's where you have your moral code, that makes up about 10% of your thought process. The other part of that is your subconscious. That's about 90%. And the thing that's awesome is your conscious thought will always protect your subconscious. So I can't say to you, go kill someone because that's against your moral code. So two things would happen. If I had you in a hypnotic or trance-like state, your body would either ignore the suggestion or you would come out of that hypnotic state.
Right away, because the conscious
Right.
mind is protecting you.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
So let's get rid of that misconception. Number one, it's not mind control. When you go into hypnosis with a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist, it's a collaboration because you're giving them permission, and that's why it's important for the hypnotist to or the hypnotherapist to always you know conduct business or conduct themselves in a way that is ethical and in the best interest of the client because you're in their subconscious. You don't want to implant negative thoughts or negative images into their subconscious.
So when one sees you for this type of experience, well, I guess what was your initial experience
Well,
like?
again, my initial experience was self hypnosis.
Oh, self-hypnosis. Okay.
Yes. So I tried it and I found it working. It was self hypnosis. And because I've been so blessed and I've been so fortunate, after a while I said, you know what? I have to learn this science and share it with others. Because when you've been so blessed, you have to share that gift with others.
So now, were you reading something for that self-hypnosis, or did you record your own voice? Did you?
No, I
And
was listening to an audio file.
okay, okay. And that was an audio file that you recorded of your own voice, or was it
No,
something else?
I found on YouTube. I found on YouTube.
Okay. Okay. And then you needed to learn the science. You felt really compelled because you had such great results.
Exactly.
Hmm. So now, do you work one-on-one with clients?
I sure do. I work one on one with clients, and you got to remember, I learned during the pandemic, and I do it virtually. Zoom is my best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Zoom is my best friend with my podcast and being
Mhm.
able to share conversations like ours.
Yes, yes, yes,
And so you see them virtually. So do you, I guess, a client comes to you, this is what he or she wants to work on,
yes,
and from there you curate.
yes. What happens is I'll give a personal contact me. I'll give a pre-talk, and in that pre-talk, I we'll talk about what your goals and aspirations are, and we'll talk about the issue. And of course, the issue is never the issue when it comes to something like that. We'll see what the underlying problem is, and then from there, if it's something that I can assist you with, I will certainly do so. And then I'll also give you what's called a suggestibility test to see how well, you take to suggestions. Now, I will say this, not everyone is a good candidate for hypnosis. Okay. If you are in a drug or alcohol induced psychosis, you should not be hypnotized. If you're bipolar, you kind of don't want to do that. And if you suffer from schizophrenia or epilepsy, we don't want to hypnotize you. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done, but we have to be very, very cautious.
Yeah. So, and when you take someone into a hypnotic state or the trance-like state, is it a certain brain wave you're working with?
No, no. What we're doing actually, when you are in a hypnotic state, you are hyper focused. You're really hyper focused, and you don't. One of the myths is that you have to be in a relaxed state, and you really don't. I've seen people, get hypnotized right on the street, and that's definitely not a relaxing environment. For the sake of hypnotherapy, you want it to be a relaxed state, but you don't necessarily have to be in a relaxed state. to go into a hypnotic trance. As a matter of fact, people don't understand. Hypnosis or some form of subconscious, maneuvering. I don't want to use the word manipulation, but maneuvering takes place every day. Why do you think when you go to the movie theater, one of the last things that you hear before the movie starts is the sound of popcorn popping or soda pop opening? Because subconsciously they're telling you, go buy. Go buy this from the concession stand. Even when you walk through the grocery store, you'll see things that we favor kids to buy. They'll be in bright wrappers, and they'll also be right at a child's eye level, so
Mhm.
that it catches their attention. And they're hoping that the kid is just going to go bonkers. Mommy, mommy, or daddy, daddy, I want this, I want this, I want this.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. So subliminal messaging is used all the time.
Yeah, and they become hyper focused on the item and
Yes.
and the characters like all specifically designed to, you know, pull one
Yeah.
or pull a buyer in off the time. So now would you say this it takes about 10-15 minutes? Is there an amount of time before one gets into that state?
you know it depends on that person's level of and in my case with hypnotherapy, their ability to relax. I've had some people where I can drop them within a minute, just drop them just like that. Then I've had other people where I've had to work and use a different technique to get them under, to get them in the trance-like state.
And then once they've dropped down into that state, what is happening during the
Okay.
session?
During that session, what I typically do is I can use several things. I can use a regression to go to root cause to figure out what the issue is, or if it's a situation where it stops smoking, I will figure out what your trigger is. We'll work on that trigger, and then I'll also do something to make that habit less appealing. So, like for a smoker, what I would typically do probably is once we figure out what that root cause is, we work on the root cause, and then I'd say something like, "Well, every time you attempt to pick up a cigarette, I want you to think of the foulest smell that you could smell, or the foulest thing that you can taste, and every time you have that urge to pick up a cigarette, you're going to taste that in your mouth, or you're going to feel that, and that is the deterrent at that point. But before we get to that deterrent, two things have to happen. Number one, you have to really, really want to stop. We call it threshold in the business. You have to really be at threshold, because if you're not at threshold, then your chances are over time that trigger is going to activate again, and then you're going to go right back to it. So, before I take on a non-smoking client, I would typically say to them, "Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired?" And I would attempt to find out their motivation for wanting to stop beyond the obvious health risks.
Mhm. And so the desire to want to quit, which is similar, right,
Yeah.
with your addict, right? It's got to be them. It can't be the people around them that want them to quit. It really has to be the individual is really ready. And as you said, I think threshold's a great word
Mhm.
to make changes,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
like the breaking point
Mm.
in a way,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? The straw that breaks the camel's back. That's
Yeah.
when maybe one is eventually ready to.
Yeah, and again, you know, first of all, let me say I am a proponent of all therapies, of all therapies. My thought process is, if it's something that brings you comfort and it takes you away from that issue, whatever is bothering you, then it's therapy. Do it. As long as you're not harming yourself or anyone else, do it. I have a friend that has very bad PTSD, and what he actually does is he flies model airplanes, and that relaxes him.
That's great. Yeah,
Mm.
and oftentimes therapy doesn't look traditional
Yeah,
in a sense. It's not always, sometimes, talk therapy can, and talk therapy oftentimes, is great and effective,
Yes.
but many, I think, might say, and, I've looked to alternative modalities when I felt like talk therapy was not really propelling me forward
Mhm, mhm.
more. And then I might go revisit it again. After,
Yes.
you know, integrating things like hypnotherapy or some movement-based therapies or some breath work. There's so many different ways to try to skin that cat and peel
Yeah.
back the layers of that onion.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that we have to always remember, you know, healing is a lifelong process. There's no way an individual can live on this earth and not experience some type of trauma. And the thing that we have to be cognizant of is the fact that once you heal one issue, there's always another one right there waiting. And just because this modality worked for issue A, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for issue B. So
Yeah, absolutely. So then, aside from, I know you mentioned smoking, which definitely I think people think of trying. I know I have had friends who've tried hypnosis to quit smoking. And
mm,
then you mentioned it helped you with chronic pain.
mhm.
What other things might you recommend hypnosis for?
Okay. Well, I myself, I help individuals with pain management, stop smoking or vaping, mental and emotional detox, anger management, insomnia and things of that nature. Almost anything that can be, dealt with or thought with the mind can be, worked with hypnosis. It's a matter of if hypnosis will be effective for the individual.
And when you're in session, is the client communicating with you?
Yes. Yes. What I'm doing at that point, like with an emotional or mental detox, what I will do, I will have that individual, I will put them in a trance-like state, and then from there, I will take them through a series of steps that will help them, revisit, that issue. And what we're doing is we're actually reframing what that issue looks like. The example that I like to give is the example of a child and a spider. Now, a newborn child does not know fear. So you could theoretically take a spider and let it run across a newborn child's belly and it would have no reaction. But if you do the same thing with an individual that has been traumatized by a spider or who has been taught to believe that a spider is something that you can fear. When you put that spider on them, they're going to react that way. So what we do with hypnosis is we're reframing how things are perceived, but by the mind.
And some of that is through suggestions that you make.
Yes, yes, and also suggestions during session, and then often post hypnotic suggestions.
It brings me back to I have this fear of mice,
Okay.
and I know exactly where it comes from. My mom was deathly afraid and like would find them in our washing machine, some like strange places, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because I think she was afraid, I guess when you say hypnotism is happening every day, just like her repeated reactions around mice
Yes.
has shaped the way I've moved, into my adulthood, being afraid of like just so squeamish about
Yes.
them.
Yes. No, fear is learned.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you mentioned the spider crawling across a baby's tummy, I can see exactly, like I can visualize that and
Mm,
see that, yes, absolutely, that baby probably would not even flinch at that. But over time and experiences with that spider would potentially shift that for that individual.
correct.
Because if I feel anything itchy, I'm like freaking.
Yes, absolutely.
And that might not even be from a parent, right? You might have just seen your friend freak out.
Yes, yes.
Like I'm afraid of dogs. I'm not that fearful of dogs. I have dogs, but
Mm.
when we were walking home from the bus stop one day, my my little friend came home with me that day. We
Mhm.
were kind of cut through this backyard. It was like a shortcut,
Yes.
and the dog bit the back of her leg.
Oh, wow.
And so from that point forward, this just little bit of fear was instilled in me. I didn't want to, that dogs can bite.
Yes, yes, yes.
And we knew that dog, but we were running and we spooked the dog that particular day, and the dog bit my friend in the back of the leg.
Mm.
So I could see, any sort of, I guess, maybe even, I don't know if more severe traumas like car accidents, I don't know if that comes up as being a positive, if, hypnotherapy would be a positive modality for something more traumatic.
Yeah. Well, the human mind is absolutely amazing. There have been times that you got to remember the brain will do things to protect itself. You know, hypnosis has also been used in helping people sometimes remember, crime details when they witness something so heinous that you it's tucked away to protect you, or so we would use hypnosis sometimes to help to bring that up.
Oh, like PTSD.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes,
So now so do you find that clients come for regular sessions? Is there a protocol?
yes. What will happen is, again, I would meet you for a pre-talk. Then we'd go over goals and what you seek to accomplish. And then from that point, we go ahead and we'd schedule a session. Now, the way that I handle my practice is I will go ahead and I'll have the first paid session. And then the second session, if it's needed, there'll be a follow-up that's free of charge. And then if there is a need for a third session, then I would drop the price a little bit because I'm not in it to obviously get rich. What's more important to me is the healing. And then after you have the second session, if there's a need for a third session, that or after you have the third session, if there's a need for a fourth session, that fourth session would be free because it's a follow up to the second paid session.
And so do you spread those out over a certain amount of time?
I usually go a week at a time.
Oh,
So we'll have the first paid session, and then I'll give you some things to work on, and I'll ask you to journal and write, when you thought of that issue that we were working on. If you didn't experience anything, and I typically can wrap things up within 1 to 3 sessions.
yeah, I was going to ask you if there was homework, if there's something that individuals are doing in between sessions or even
Yeah,
after you wrap up.
yeah, yeah. I check in with my clients from time to time just to see how they're doing.
Yeah,
And it's rewarding when you can work with someone who's had trauma for so many years, and it's alleviating. It's so liberating, and that's what fuels me to keep going.
absolutely. It's allows an individual to maybe have a whole new, well, and you use the word reframe, but have an entirely new experience of life. If you can reframe,
Yes, yes.
I know, sometimes we can get so stuck in that one thing, right? That traumatic experience, or
Hmm.
it's hard to shift or even like see that. So- Sometimes those events, although tragic maybe, or, devastating and
Hmm.
discomfortable, are oftentimes that catalyst and they make us who we are.
Yes, yes.
We
You
can
know,
reframe them as a gift or like an opportunity for growth for our soul.
yes. Like I view my physical challenge as a blessing. because it taught me that I have to use this. It allowed me to see a world that was different than often was in my actual environment.
Now, do you think if you reflect back on your life, I don't know how old you are or your age, that there was a time that you uh, embodied more of a victim role, like, oh, what was me? I have this. No.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. As an individual that's physically challenged, the my younger years and my teenage years were tough. Going through the normal things that every child going through puberty does. You know, Kids are so judgmental.
Oh,
They're so judgmental. If and I couldn't run and jump and do the things that the other kids did, and I was lucky enough to find sports for the disabled. You know, I'm a former Paralympian. Yeah.
okay. That's cool. So you found that. And how old were you when you found that?
I actually competed. I First of all, because of my cerebral palsy, I started swimming at 6.
Now, were you wheelchair bound?
No, no, no. I walked with a walker at
Okay.
school, and my mom actually carried me around the house until I was 12. I did not ambulate on my own until I was like, 11 or 12 years old.
Okay. That reminds me, I babysat two little boys. They both had cerebral palsy and were on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And one was wheelchair bound, and
Mm-hmm.
the other little boy, he was able to use a walker, one was not.
Okay.
And yeah, and I'm sure it was a big endeavor for your mother. I mean, what an amazing.
Yes, yes. And people ask me where I get my strength from. It's absolutely from my mom. My mom had a sixth grade education, and she raised 3 children, me being a middle child with a disability. She got her GED at 67 and had Alzheimer's at 71. So
Oh,
that Yeah, so that's the last thing that God wanted her to do with her mind. But it is directly her strength that caused me to be the person who I am. And I will say this for any parents: if you have a child with special needs, do not coddle them. Understand what their limitations are, but do not coddle them. I cannot tell you the number of. I have a very dear friend, actually. We had the same intellectual ability growing up, but the difference was his mom coddled him. And, my mom obviously didn't. And he unfortunately has never worked a day in his life. And, when his mom passed away a few years ago, he had to go into a nursing home.
mm.
And it's so tragic, and so I would say to any parents that have, children with special needs, understand what their limitations are, but also celebrate the things that they can do and allow them to live their best life in the way that they know how. Normalize their life as much as possible.
Have you by chance read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
Yes.
And I mean, when you, I mean, they really, I just remember that story, right? His son is born without ears,
Mm,
and they
mm,
were determined to
mm,
normalize his life. And eventually they found out, right, this temporal bone, I think it was,
mm,
can I guess decipher, discern sound, and they eventually, had him hearing.
mm,
Like they
mm.
were determined, and it just makes me think about, as you mentioned, not coddling, really giving them an opportunity to grow and flourish and figure out who they are
As best they can.
as best they can. Yeah. And it makes me think about that story. So do you feel, I know you were an optician, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or am, you still are.
Yeah.
You feel like that was your life calling, or do you feel
Absolutely. You know, my life calling is actually to help individuals in whatever way I can. I've been fortunate enough, I've been blessed enough to have two careers where it actually does not feel like work. When I'm sitting in front of someone and I'm helping them with pick out a pair of glasses, or I'm helping them to see, that's not work to me, you know. And when I'm helping someone via hypnosis and hypnotherapy, I'm changing their world for them. I mean, they are doing it, but I'm assisting in that process. What how That's very fulfilling for me. And for me, I live my life, with, or I attempt to live my life with this, mantra, because I've been so blessed. I have to be a blessing to others. And the moment that I stop being that blessing to others, then, my blessings may stop.
Mhm.
Do I make mistakes? Yes, I am human. I am totally made of flesh, you know. But I start every day of my life with the intention of, let me make someone happy today. Let me enhance the world around me, even if it's just by the most incremental amount. Then it's a good day.
So is faith a part of your life?
It is. I am a very spiritual person. I'm a very spiritual person. My grandmother used to say, "Man, you're gonna be my little preacher. You're gonna be my little preacher." So, I find that as you learn more about yourself, your spirituality increases. Not necessarily your religion, and I'm not anti-religion, you know. I come from a deep Christian background, but my spirituality, and the reason why I choose the word spirituality is because during COVID we were not congregating. So that really, really forced people to work on their individual relationship with their creator, whomever that may be.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree. For me, it's that, yeah, whoever that is, a God of one's understanding,
Mhm.
good orderly direction. I think they said, because I've gone to some Al-Anon meetings before, and they use the word God, but a God of your understanding. But with the acronym good orderly direction, I was like, oh, that's right.
That's awesome. That's the first time I've heard that. Good order and direction. Wow.
Yeah. And then there was another one they mentioned, when the ego gets in the way, you're edging God out.
Mhm. Yes.
And the ego does keep us alive, but when we're getting too hyper focused with our ego, and
Mhm.
then we're not necessarily connecting with our own inner divine.
Yes. Yes.
And we all have access to that if we can, like, slow down and relax and
Yeah.
become more aware with the present moment.
I do believe in God, and He has a special calling on my life. I'll never, and this is, He's shown me over and over in my life. And I remember with the passing of my mom, I had walked into, a Waffle House with someone, and, you know, Silent Night by the Temptations was playing, one of my mom's favorite songs. And I sat down and I just started to cry. I just started to cry. I just started to boohoo almost uncontrollably. So the person I was with, they were like, "Look, do we need to leave?" And I'm like, "Yes." I looked down at my phone and there were 5 missed calls from my brother. And I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "You need to come home. Mom passed."
Mm.
Wow. Now, my mom passed away on the 22nd. Oh, it's a little fuzzy, and I'm God ashamed to say that. the 22nd of December. Okay. No, it was the 23rd, excuse me. It was the 23rd of December, right? Um, her mother's birthday was the 22nd. So in my mind, it was my grandmother saying, "Come be with me."
Mm. Yeah, that gave
So
me chills, those little goosebumps. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? That,
yeah,
like that's like spirit. When I know the goosebumps are there, I'm like, whoa, that's
yeah.
yeah,
So whenever I'm having my moments of trepidation, because we all have them, whenever things are just going astray and I've done my hypnosis for the day and things of that nature, I just take a moment and I was like, okay, you take the wheel. I can't deal.
yeah. You take the wheel. I can't deal. I like it. I've heard others, but I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
So you do your own practice of of daily self hypnosis.
Yes, 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 yes. I work retail. So
Yeah,
sometimes people come in with a very bad energy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have to keep that at bay
Yeah.
because
So
I have many empathetic, you know, traits about me. So I have to, you know, keep my closet nice and empty and room to help others.
right, and then in a way to it sounds like sort of protect right your own energy field so that you're because
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
right, take it on and we can come home and things can feel heavy when you've been with people who
yeah, yeah, yeah. And when I managed, when I managed, I'm no longer in management, in the optical world, but when I managed, I used to always tell my staff, when people come in, you should treat them like they're your mother or your father. And if you go treat your mother and father bad, you don't need to be working customer service. But at the same time, don't allow your energy to upset someone's day. You don't know what's going on in that person's mind or in their life before when they walk through that door. Let's have them leave making their day a little bit better.
yeah, because our energy does influence others.
Yes, it does. It does. It
Hmm.
does. Absolutely.
I mean, as the receiver of one's energy, we can't necessarily let them take us down.
Oh yes,
Right.
yes. There's so many energy vampires. And that's a whole nother podcast,
I
actually.
know it is. Yeah. So what would be your message to live to others, to the audience, to live an unapologetic life?
Oh, wow. You're gonna like this one. When you look in the mirror, you should see greatness. And if for some reason you don't, I want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and when you open them, begin to see the greatness in you.
That's powerful.
Yes,
And I think it's difficult.
it is. It is. But it begins with just one step.
Yeah, one step. Look in the mirror and see greatness.
And if you don't, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and when you open your eyes, begin to see the greatness in you. It's not going to be easy sometimes, but make the attempt. And make that attempt every day. And when you make that attempt every single day, eventually it's going to happen.
Yeah. That reminds me again. I mean, because we've just read Think and Grow Rich, and it's not he's got a saying in there. It's like every day, he said, put it on your mirror. Every
Mm,
day in every way, I am getting better and better.
mm,
And like if that's what you have, whatever you need to say, like find that message. But and I
mm,
think looking at ourselves in the mirror and like versus like just being over here and not looking at myself, like really like
mm,
looking at yourself so that you can see it and believe it and
mm.
send maybe the cells, the mind, the brain, I don't know, the psyche, this message.
One thing that is key with hypnosis. Again, we reframe things. And it's truly a state of what the mind can perceive, the body can achieve. You hear those stories of those moms, a baby being trapped under the car. The mom, she has such an adrenaline rush. She's able to lift that car off that baby because that's her baby,
Right.
and that's just will and adrenaline. My baby, my God. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. The mind is powerful.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, where can people connect with you, Mark?
Okay. On Facebook, I am under Mark Kemp. Also, Tranquility Health and Wellness. I can be reached on YouTube under Tranquility Health and Wellness. On Instagram on Tranquility HW.
Okay. So Tranquility Health and Wellness
Yes,
on YouTube
yes,
and Tranquility HW on Instagram,
yes,
Mark Kemp on Facebook.
yes, and also Tranquility Health and Wellness on Facebook also. And
Okay.
and, and I
And you
will
have a
say this.
website. You have a website.
Yes, that's Tranquility Health and Wellness. No, Tranquility Health Wellness dot LLC.
Okay. And I'm going to make sure all those links are in the show notes below. Very clickable.
Yes, I'm going to send them to you. I'm going to send my contact information to you.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. And people can find out how to book.
Yes, yes. How to book? My consultation sessions are always free, and I also live by this mantra: the only bad question is the one not asked.
The only bad question is the one not.
Not asked.
Love it. I love it. So the only bad question is the one not asked, which falls in line with unapologetic living, right? Because if we're living
Yes,
unapologetically, we're going to ask those questions.
yes.
And then seeing greatness, looking at yourself in the mirror every day and see greatness.
Mm,
Well,
that's what I live by.
thank you so much for joining me today, Mark.
It has indeed been my pleasure.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I definitely think we need to have a part two on energy vampires.
Definitely, definitely. And I'm part of it, and I believe you're also. I'm one of those go-to people.
Mhm.
Whenever someone needs someone to talk to, whenever they need someone to just listen, or when they need something, I'm that go-to person. But the question is, where do we go when our well runs dry?
Yeah.
How do we re-energize ourselves? And I say that's a whole podcast by itself.
Oh, yeah, that one too, because I know like, you know, I don't know about you, and I'm sure when right, you went through a certification program, hypnotherapy program.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
sure they preach that they sure preached it when I went through massage school and stretch school. Like you need to be doing your own self-care. You're giving, giving, giving. Make sure you are also filling your well, filling
yes,
your cup. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, because if not, you know, and that's part of the problem, and that's what leads to a lot of health practitioners, both conventional and non-conventional. That's part of what leads to burnout. We spend so much time helping others. We do very little to help ourselves. That's why doctors and healthcare practitioners, we make some of the worst patients because we we know what it takes to take care of ourselves. So we say to ourselves, "Oh, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it," and we never do.
I know. They must know that about us when we go into these when we learn new modalities to help others. Because I know they reiterated it to me, and I am definitely guilty of not always. I don't know the last time I had any body work done.
Yeah,
And I'm a stretch and massage therapist, and I'd have to like go back maybe a couple years ago and find on an old calendar when that was.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And honestly, if I didn't have such a need for hypnosis at times, or if I didn't wear glasses myself, you know, who knows when I'd get an eye exam? Who knows? Who knows? When I do that self healing or that mindfulness or that shadow work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So it's important to just carve out that time and to know that we are all worthy of that time for ourselves to do what needs to take place, right? Because when we're doing that, we can show up better for all the other people in our lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And being that go-to person sometimes, it's often exhausting. And then we run into, and then you know first of all, let me tell you, I have the gift of gab. I think one of the biggest fallacies in life is midlife crisis. And here's how I view midlife crisis now, having gone through it. You know, for the first time in your life, when you go through your quote unquote midlife crisis, you're no longer the custodian. If you have children, you've gone from being a custodian to consultant. Okay, you've reached that point where you've raised the kids. You're now an empty nester. But it's not a crisis for you. It's a crisis for someone else. And the reason why it's a crisis for someone else, because you're for the first time in a long time, you're saying, no, I don't want to do that. You're saying, no, I'm going to do this to spend my time. And that's usually contrary to what you've done the last 15, 20 years. And that's what shocks people. So I believe that it's actually them going through the crisis. They're going through the crisis of hearing no or hearing, yes, I'm going to do what I want to do for the first time in a very long time. And it's something that they have to do.
Yeah.
Now, we may have that doubt, okay, what am I going to do now? Because I've always done X, Y, Z. So what am I going to do now? That part of it causes question. But I think the bigger crisis is for the people around you. So they're the ones that actually label you as having the midlife crisis. You don't call it. You don't say that about yourself until you acknowledge it and that someone else has noticed it.
Yeah, I agree. I was listening. You're a man and I'm a woman, but I was listening to a book on menopause
Mm-hmm.
wisdom because I'm in the throes of perimenopause, like heading in that direction, and
Mm-hmm.
talks a lot about that. You're reaching this age where, and you use the word custodian, but like, you know, us as women, right? You are doing all this caregiving. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of men are providing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then yeah, we get to this age where we don't have to do that anymore. It almost like turns off, and all that work that's been going outwards now gets to come within.
Yes, yes.
That self-care. Whoa, nah, maybe I'm not, no, I'm not doing that. And so we finally, I don't know, I think it's almost as though we finally given ourselves permission to, come back home to ourselves instead
Yeah.
of all this outpouring and out, giving, 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 and we get to come home. And that means, yeah, like you said, saying no,
Mm-hmm.
um, and setting boundaries and doing more, what seems like, like what seems like a midlife crisis. You're right. It's like the other perception. I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that person's going through, well, no, actually, no, she's actually just coming back home, or
Yeah,
he's coming
exactly.
back
Yeah.
home and, can focus, more on what's going to. And I think it's also a time, and I don't know if you agree that, um, you're shifting focuses, maybe. I think you might see career changes or additions. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, you brought in the hypnotherapy since COVID. So that's like the last 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah. I will be 59 years old in a few weeks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm starting a business at I started a business at this advanced. I hate to use the word advanced age, but at this stage of my life, most people they wouldn't think of doing that. They're just gonna ride out with their career with what they've had. And my career has certainly been good to me. But you know, what's that saying? The what is it? 45 is the new 30 now.
Yeah.
Well, my energy for certain things is it's even stronger than it ever has been in my life. Now there are some things where I'm slowing down a little bit. Now a good example is I'm never going to retire from optician. You know, everyone that I know of that have called themselves retired, their health went downhill. You know, there's a history of Alzheimer's in my family, so I do things to keep my mind active. And the day that I can't turn a screw in a pair of glasses, the day that I can't use my mind, I'm not living. So let me go.
Yeah. The have you heard of the blue zones?
No.
There's five-ish blue zones around the world, and the blue zones have the most centurions.
Mm-hmm.
And to live past 100, we just don't see that very often.
Yeah.
And but then they all typically have some elements in common: faith or spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
whole foods, eating whole foods, fresh foods, uh, community,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to think what else, but they don't retire.
Yeah.
Not necessarily doing some of the work that so many Americans are doing, this like go, go, go. They're doing things they love. They feel purposeful. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm not sure that we are designed to retire. I don't think we are meant to work and work and work in a passionless career
Yes. Yes. Yes.
uh all the way, and so I agree with you. I mean, there was a gentleman, he was our neighbor. He was like 54. He retired. He was a part of the oh, he had a Ford Mustang, and he was very active in the Ford Mustang club here, and he ended up going back to work, but he passed away within 18 months of retiring.
Mm, mm, mm.
And I don't think that's uncommon.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People
Yeah.
lose they don't know what to do after that if they haven't kind of done some of that work to find out, like, how do I show up next?
Yeah, exactly. I always think of those couples that they've been together 50, 60 years and one passes on before the other one, and the other one passes away shortly because they've lost their companion. They've lost that will.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's yeah, it can definitely, that you hear that all the time, and I think sometimes that's just like deep heartbreak.
Yes, 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 yes.
Truly. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. It's been outstanding. Yes, yes. And anytime you want me to come back, you know how to reach me. I will. You know, I am a trivia buff. I have a plethora of knowledge about so many things that so many people may say is inconsequential. And one thing I've learned about sales is you make quick 5 or 10 minute connections. You know, and I used to tell my staff, when you're working with someone, establish a rapport. If you see that person is a fisherman, okay, you may know one fact about fishing, but bring that fact out because that's going to make them comfortable,
Yeah.
and it's going to cause that connection.
Yeah, it could be one little thing.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. But again, I want to thank you for this enriching experience for me. I thank you.
Oh, well, I thank you. I love meeting new people and learning new things. I think that's one of the most favorite aspects of having this podcast is that I get to meet so many interesting individuals, and everyone has such their own life experience to share, which I think is so important.
Mm, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're more than welcome. And I look forward to our next encounter.
Absolutely.